Chapter 1. The morning air was crisp in Pinewood, a sleepy town nestled between rolling hills and dense forests. Special Agent Malik Carter of the Federal Bureau of Investigation walked down Main Street with measured steps, his observant eyes taking in the quaint storefronts and local businesses. He was dressed in civilian clothes, dark jeans, a navy button-down, and a light jacket, deliberately inconspicuous for his assignment. This wasn't his first small-town investigation, but something about Pinewood felt different. The sidewalks weren't crowded, yet he couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. Every few steps, someone would glance his way, then quickly avert their eyes. He'd felt this before, in other small towns where black faces were rare, but he'd learned to compartmentalize such feelings, focusing instead on the job at hand. Today's task was straightforward: preliminary reconnaissance before the official audit of the Pinewood Police Department began. The department had a history of complaints, excessive force, discriminatory practices, and questionable arrests, all matters that fell under Malik's purview as Deputy Director of the FBI's Internal Affairs Division. But he preferred to get a feel for a place before announcing his presence. It was a technique that had served him well over his 15-year career. The corner cafe looked promising, a good place to observe local dynamics and perhaps overhear candid conversations about the police force. He checked his watch, 8:47 a.m. As he approached the cafe's entrance, a police cruiser slowed beside him. "Excuse me, sir." The officer's voice had that particular edge Malik recognized all too well. Malik turned, professional courtesy in his expression, despite the immediate tension he felt. "Good morning, officer." The officer, a white man in his 30s with close-cropped hair and mirrored sunglasses, stepped out of his vehicle. His nameplate read, Jenkins. He approached with one hand resting on his holster, a subtle posture that spoke volumes. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area," Jenkins said, eyes scanning Malik from head to toe. "Mind telling me what you're doing in Pinewood?" Malik nodded, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "Just passing through, getting some coffee." He didn't mention his FBI credentials yet. Years of experience had taught him to gather information before revealing his hand. "ID, please." It wasn't a request. Of course. Malik reached for his wallet, movements measured and telegraphed. Officer Jenkins tensed as Malik's hand moved toward his jacket. "Slowly," he barked, his hand now firmly gripping his holster. Malik paused, then continued with exaggerated slowness, extracting his wallet and opening it to reveal his FBI badge and identification card. "Special Agent Malik Carter, Federal Bureau of Investigation." Jenkins studied the badge, his expression shifting from suspicion to disbelief. "This doesn't look right," he said, taking the ID from Malik's hand. "I assure you, officer, it's genuine. I'm here on official business." A small crowd had begun to gather across the street, morning coffee runs and store openings temporarily forgotten as the scene unfolded. "Yeah, right," Jenkins scoffed. "We get people coming through claiming all sorts of things. This badge looks fake to me." Malik remained calm, though his pulse quickened. "You can verify my credentials by calling the FBI field office in Portland. Ask for Assistant Director Reynolds." Instead of reaching for his radio, Jenkins reached for his handcuffs. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." "Officer, I strongly advise against this course of action," Malik said, his voice level but firm. "Turn around now!" Jenkins's voice rose, drawing more onlookers. Malik weighed his options. Resisting would only escalate the situation. Being a black FBI agent had taught him that sometimes, even with a badge, compliance was the safest route, no matter how unjust. He turned slowly, hands raised. "I'm complying, but I want to be clear that you're making a serious mistake." The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into his wrists as Jenkins secured them with unnecessary force. "You have the right to remain silent," Jenkins began, pushing Malik against the side of the police cruiser. As the Miranda rights continued, Malik caught sight of his reflection in the cruiser's window, a highly trained federal agent, deputy director of an elite division, being arrested in a small town where he'd come to investigate police misconduct. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Officer, check my jacket pocket," Malik said calmly. "There's a federal identification card and my bureau cell phone. One call will confirm who I am." Jenkins ignored him, completing the pat-down with theatrical thoroughness. The crowd had grown, with whispers and phone cameras now documenting the scene. A second police car arrived, and an older officer stepped out. His uniform indicated higher rank, Sheriff Dawson, according to his nameplate. "What's going on here, Jenkins?" the sheriff asked, surveying the scene with narrowed eyes. "Caught this guy acting suspicious, sir. Claims he's FBI, but the badge looks fake to me." Sheriff Dawson approached, studying Malik with calculating eyes. "FBI, huh?" "Yes, Sheriff," Malik replied. "Deputy Director Malik Carter, Internal Affairs Division. If you'd check my credentials properly, you'd see they're genuine." The sheriff took the badge from Jenkins, examining it more carefully than his subordinate had. His expression remained unreadable, but something in his eyes suggested he recognized the badge's authenticity. "Why would an FBI agent be in Pinewood?" he asked, skepticism heavy in his voice. Malik met his gaze steadily. "I believe that falls under need-to-know information, Sheriff. Now, I'd appreciate it if these handcuffs were removed so we can discuss this matter professionally." The sheriff handed the badge back to Jenkins. "Keep him secured. We'll sort this out at the station." As they guided him toward the police car, Malik spotted a black SUV turning onto Main Street, standard bureau issue. The timing couldn't have been better. The SUV pulled up sharply, and two agents in suits emerged. Malik recognized them immediately, Special Agents Richardson and Hayes from his team. "Sheriff Dawson?" Agent Richardson called out, her voice carrying the unmistakable authority of federal law enforcement. "I'm Special Agent Richardson, FBI. What seems to be the situation with Deputy Director Carter?" The atmosphere shifted instantly. Sheriff Dawson's confident demeanor faltered as he realized the gravity of his miscalculation. "There appears to be some confusion," he said, attempting to regain composure. Agent Hayes approached Malik. "Are you all right, sir?" "I'm fine, Hayes," Malik replied, "though I'd appreciate these cuffs being removed." Sheriff Dawson nodded quickly to Jenkins, who fumbled with the keys, his earlier confidence evaporated. As the handcuffs came off, Malik rubbed his wrists, his gaze moving between the officers and the gathered crowd. "Sheriff Dawson," Malik said, his voice now carrying the full weight of his authority. "I was planning to introduce myself formally tomorrow, but it seems circumstances have accelerated our meeting. I'm here leading a federal audit of your department following multiple complaints of civil rights violations and discriminatory practices." He straightened his jacket. "What just happened will make an illuminating first paragraph in my report." The color drained from the sheriff's face. "Deputy Director, there's been a misunderstanding." "Has there?" Malik interrupted. "Officer Jenkins stopped me without probable cause, dismissed my valid federal credentials, and handcuffed me in public view. I'm curious what made me appear suspicious enough to warrant such treatment." The silence that followed was deafening. The onlookers, who had been watching with curiosity, now understood they were witnessing something significant, a moment when power dynamics had suddenly and dramatically reversed. "My team will be setting up at your station within the hour," Malik continued. "I expect full cooperation and access to all records. And Sheriff?" He met the man's eyes directly. "This incident has just expanded the scope of our investigation considerably." As he walked toward the FBI vehicle, Malik caught snippets of conversation from the crowd. "Did you see that? They just arrested an FBI director." Always knew something wasn't right in that department. Agent Richardson opened the door for him. Sir, are you sure you're okay? Malik nodded, glancing back at the officers still standing frozen on the sidewalk. I'm fine, Richardson, but our work here just got a lot more interesting. He slid into the vehicle, already mentally composing the report he would write. What happened today wasn't just about him, it was about patterns of behavior deeply embedded in systems across the country. And sometimes, Malik thought, the best way to expose a broken system was to let it break itself in front of witnesses. Chapter 2. The Pinewood Police Station was a modest brick building with an American flag hanging limply from a pole out front. As the FBI team assembled in the station's small conference room, Malik could feel the tension radiating from the local officers. Word had spread quickly about the morning's incident. Agent Richardson had set up laptops and equipment with methodical precision, while Agent Hayes stood by the door, his presence a silent reminder of federal authority. 2 additional agents, Williams and Chen, had arrived from Portland, bringing with them boxes of files and documentation. Sheriff Dawson knocked tentatively on the open door, a stark contrast to his earlier demeanor. Deputy Director Carter, may I have a word? Malik nodded, following the sheriff to a corner of the room. The man's posture was different now, shoulders hunched, eyes avoiding direct contact. I want to personally apologize for this morning's incident, Dawson began, his voice low. Officer Jenkins has been placed on administrative leave pending. Let me stop you there, Sheriff, Malik interrupted. This isn't about one officer's mistake. This is about a pattern that allowed that mistake to happen in the first place. The sheriff blinked, caught off guard by Malik's directness. Tell me, Malik continued, how many officers in your department have received implicit bias training in the last 2 years? Well, we have limited resources for... And how many complaints has your department received regarding racial profiling or excessive force against minorities? Sheriff Dawson cleared his throat. I'd have to check the records. No need. We already have. Malik gestured toward the files Agent Chen was organizing. 17 complaints in a town with a minority population of less than 12%. That's a concerning ratio. Wouldn't you agree? The sheriff's discomfort was palpable. Those complaints weren't substantiated. By your internal review process, yes. That's precisely why we're here. Malik's tone remained professional, but unyielding. What happened to me this morning wasn't an isolated incident, Sheriff. It was a symptom of a systemic problem. Before Dawson could respond, Officer Jenkins appeared in the doorway, no longer in uniform but in civilian clothes. His eyes darted nervously around the room. Sir, I was told to report here, he said to the sheriff, studiously avoiding looking at Malik. Malik turned to face him. Officer Jenkins, please join us. The young officer approached reluctantly, his earlier bravado completely dissolved. I want to be clear about something, Malik said, addressing both men. This investigation isn't a witch hunt. It's an opportunity to identify flaws in your procedures, training gaps, and biases that might be affecting how you serve this community. Jenkins shifted uncomfortably. Sir, about this morning. What I want to know, Malik continued, is what exactly made me look suspicious to you, Officer Jenkins? Was it my behavior or was it something else? The direct question hung in the air. Jenkins looked to Sheriff Dawson, who offered no support. We had reports of suspicious activity in that area, Jenkins finally replied. What kind of suspicious activity? Malik pressed. Potential drug activity. And what about my behavior suggested drug activity? Malik's tone remained calm, but his eyes were intensely focused on the officer. Jenkins struggled to find words. Nothing specific, sir. Just a feeling. A feeling, Malik repeated. You detained a federal officer based on a feeling. Do you often detain people based on feelings, Officer Jenkins? The question wasn't just for Jenkins. It was for Sheriff Dawson, too. Both men seemed to recognize the deeper implications. "Deputy Director," the sheriff interjected, "I assure you we don't condone profiling of any kind." "Intentions and results are different things, Sheriff," Malik replied. "Now, I suggest both of you prepare for formal interviews with my team. We'll be conducting them individually throughout the day." As they left, Agent Richardson approached with a tablet. "Sir, we've compiled some initial statistics you might find interesting." She handed him the device. "The department's arrest rates show significant disparities based on race." Malik nodded, unsurprised. "Let's also look at traffic stops, citations, and use of force incidents. I want a comprehensive picture." "Already working on it," she confirmed. "Also, several community members have reached out wanting to speak with you. Word about what happened this morning has spread." That wasn't surprising either. Small towns had efficient grapevines, and what had transpired on Main Street would have been noteworthy even without the racial component. "Set up meetings starting tomorrow," Malik instructed, "and contact the mayor's office. I want to understand how much oversight exists between local government and the police department." As Richardson returned to her work, Malik's phone buzzed. It was a text from Assistant Director Reynolds in Washington. "Heard about this morning, you okay?" Malik typed a brief response. "I'm fine. Actually, it was illuminating. Gave me first-hand experience of exactly what we're investigating." Reynolds's reply came quickly. "Use it, but be careful. Small-town politics can get complicated." Malik knew that all too well. In his career, he'd seen how deeply law enforcement culture could be embedded in a community's identity. Challenging that culture meant challenging how people saw themselves and their town. He looked around at his team working efficiently, then through the glass walls at the local officers, watching them with a mixture of resentment and apprehension. What had happened this morning had drawn clear battle lines. The question now was how to cross them effectively. "Hayes," he called to the agent by the door. "Let's get lunch brought in. We'll be here late tonight." As Hayes nodded and stepped away to make arrangements, Malik turned his attention to the files Agent Chen had organized. Each complaint told a story. Individual moments where citizens of Pinewood had felt mistreated or unfairly targeted. Individually, each might be dismissed or explained away. Collectively, they painted a picture that couldn't be ignored. The work ahead would be challenging. Police departments didn't change easily, especially when change was imposed from outside. But what had happened on Main Street had given Malik something valuable, legitimate moral authority in the eyes of the community. He had arrived in Pinewood as an anonymous investigator. Now he was a living example of the very problems he'd come to address. And sometimes, Malik reflected, that was exactly what it took to open eyes that had been closed for far too long. Chapter 3. By evening, the Pinewood police station had transformed into a hub of activity unlike anything the small-town officers had ever experienced. FBI agents moved with purpose, requesting files, conducting interviews, and working methodically through years of records. The local officers, accustomed to being the highest authority in town, now found themselves answering to federal agents who outranked them in every way. Malik sat in what had temporarily become his office, the sheriff's personal space commandeered for the duration of the investigation. The walls were adorned with plaques and certificates, testaments to Sheriff Dawson's 27 years in law enforcement. Family photos showed him with grown children and grandchildren, a life dedicated to upholding the law. A knock at the door interrupted Malik's thoughts. It was Agent Williams. "Sir, we've finished the preliminary interviews with the patrol officers. I think you'll want to review the transcripts." She placed a tablet on the desk. "There's a pattern emerging." Malik scrolled through the document, his expression growing more serious with each page. "They all mention the same training protocols, or lack thereof." Williams nodded. "Most haven't had any significant bias training since the academy. Several mentioned informal guidance from senior officers about high-risk profiles to watch for in certain neighborhoods. Institutionalized profiling, Malik said quietly. Not written in any manual, but passed down through the ranks. He'd seen it before, the unofficial knowledge transfer that perpetuated biased policing practices. There's more, Williams continued. 3 officers separately mentioned that Officer Jenkins has had previous complaints about his conduct toward minorities, all handled internally. Nothing ever escalated. Malik leaned back in his chair. So, this morning wasn't an isolated incident for him. He thought for a moment. I want to speak with those who filed the complaints. Already arranging it, Williams confirmed. Also, Mayor Harris has agreed to meet with you tomorrow morning. She seems concerned about our presence. As she should be, Malik replied. Federal investigations tend to make local politicians nervous, especially in election years. He checked his watch. Nearly 9 p.m. That's enough for today. Tell the team we'll reconvene at 7 a.m. After Williams left, Malik gathered his things, preparing to head to the small hotel where the FBI team was staying. As he walked through the station, he noticed Officer Jenkins sitting alone in the break room, staring into a cup of coffee. A part of Malik wanted to walk past, to maintain the professional distance his position required. But another part, the part that had joined the FBI to create meaningful change, saw something in the young officer's defeated posture that gave him pause. He changed direction, entering the break room. Jenkins looked up, surprise and wariness crossing his face. Mind if I join you? Malik asked, gesturing to the empty chair. Jenkins straightened. Of course, sir. Malik sat down, studying the man across from him. Up close, without the authority of his uniform, Jenkins looked younger, mid-20s perhaps, not the hardened officer he'd appeared to be that morning. How long have you been with Pinewood PD, Jenkins? 3 years, sir. The reply was terse, defensive. Malik nodded. And before that? 4 years military, Army. What made you choose law enforcement after your service? The question seemed to catch Jenkins off guard. He'd clearly been expecting an interrogation, not a conversation. My father was a cop, he replied after a moment. His father, too. It's kind of a family tradition. So you grew up around police culture, Malik observed. Jenkins nodded, his posture still rigid. Tell me something, Malik continued, his tone conversational rather than confrontational. When you approached me this morning, what was the first thing you noticed? Jenkins hesitated, clearly weighing his words carefully. I noticed someone I didn't recognize. Pinewood is just off the interstate. You must see people you don't recognize every day. It was more than that, Jenkins said, defensive again. You were watching everything, taking it all in. It seemed suspicious. Observant, Malik corrected, a quality that makes for good law enforcement, as I'm sure you know. Jenkins didn't respond. Would you have approached me if I were white? Malik asked directly. The blunt question hung in the air between them. Jenkins opened his mouth, then closed it again. I don't, he started. Before you answer, Malik interrupted, I want you to understand something. This investigation isn't just about identifying problems, it's about fixing them. Real answers get us closer to solutions. Something in Jenkins's expression shifted, a small crack in the defensive wall. I don't know, he admitted finally. Maybe not. The honesty, however reluctant, was something Malik could work with. Why did you become a police officer, Jenkins? The real reason, not the family tradition line. Jenkins stared into his coffee for a long moment. I wanted to make a difference. After the Army, I needed something that mattered. He looked up, meeting Malik's eyes for the first time. I never thought I'd be the bad guy in someone's story. You're not a bad guy, Malik said. You're a product of a system that hasn't given you the right tools. The question is whether you're willing to learn new ones." Before Jenkins could respond, Sheriff Dawson appeared in the doorway, his expression hardening when he saw them together. "Jenkins, I need to see you in my office," he said sharply. The young officer stood immediately, the brief moment of openness gone. He nodded respectfully to Malik before following the sheriff. Malik remained seated, processing the interaction. Jenkins was a symptom, not the disease. The real work would be addressing the culture that had shaped him, a culture where officers were taught to see threats based on appearance rather than behavior. As he finally left the station, the cool night air was refreshing after hours indoors. Pinewood was quiet now, storefronts dark, streets empty. It looked peaceful, idyllic even. But Malik knew better than most how deceptive such appearances could be. His phone buzzed with a text from Agent Richardson. "Community meeting set for tomorrow afternoon." Local church offered their space, expecting significant turnout. So the community was mobilizing. Good. Real change required pressure from within as well as without. As Malik walked toward his hotel, he reflected on the day's events. What had begun as a routine audit had become something more significant, a potential catalyst for transformation in a department that desperately needed it. The confrontation on Main Street had exposed raw truths about Pinewood's law enforcement. Now the harder work began, turning that exposure into lasting change. It wouldn't be easy. Resistance would come from all sides. Officers defending their methods, community members skeptical of outsiders, politicians worried about image. But Malik had seen departments change before. Sometimes all it took was the right moment, the right pressure, and people brave enough to acknowledge problems hiding in plain sight. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. For now, Malik allowed himself to feel cautiously optimistic that his morning as a suspect might lead to evenings where others, particularly those who looked like him, wouldn't have to experience the same. Chapter 4. The Pinewood Community Church was filled beyond capacity. Residents occupied every pew, with many standing along the walls and in the back. The air was thick with anticipation as Malik took his position at the front, flanked by his FBI team. Looking out at the crowd, he noted the demographics. Predominantly white, as expected in a town like Pinewood, but with a visible minority presence clustered together near the front. Their positioning spoke volumes. They had come early, ensuring they would be heard. Mayor Harris, a woman in her 50s with a carefully maintained appearance, sat in the front row. Their morning meeting had been tense. The mayor concerned about the town's image, Malik focused on substantive changes. She had ultimately agreed to support the investigation publicly, though Malik suspected her private sentiments were less enthusiastic. "Good afternoon," Malik began, his voice carrying through the church. "For those who don't know me, I'm Deputy Director Malik Carter of the FBI's Internal Affairs Division." A murmur went through the crowd. Many had heard about the incident on Main Street, but seeing the man at the center of it in person seemed to drive home the reality of the situation. "I'm here because your police department is under federal investigation following numerous complaints regarding discriminatory practices and potential civil rights violations." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. "What I experienced personally yesterday morning has only reinforced the need for this investigation." From the corner of his eye, Malik could see Sheriff Dawson shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Several officers in uniform stood at the back, their expressions unreadable. "Today I want to hear from you, the community this department is meant to serve and protect. Your experiences, both positive and negative, matter to this investigation." Hands shot up immediately. Malik pointed to a middle-aged black woman in the front row. "Eleanor Jackson," she introduced herself standing. "I've lived in Pinewood for 38 years. What happened to you yesterday has happened to my son 6 times in the last 2 years. 6 times he's been stopped for looking suspicious. No citations, no arrests, just harassment. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. The difference is he doesn't have an FBI badge to protect him. Nods of agreement came from those around her. Malik made notes as Agent Richardson recorded the testimony. Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Has your son filed formal complaints? The first 2 times. After that, he said there was no point. Nothing changed. Malik nodded, understanding all too well. I'd like to speak with your son, if he's willing. The next person to speak was a young Latino man. Miguel Vasquez. I own the auto repair shop on Elm Street. 3 months ago, I was working late, and someone reported a suspicious person breaking into my own business. I spent the night in jail before they verified I was the owner. His frustration was evident. Would that have happened if my name was Mike Smith? The pattern continued. Minorities sharing experiences of being treated as suspects in their own community, of facing heightened scrutiny for ordinary activities. Some white residents spoke too, many expressing shock at what they were hearing, others defending the police as just doing their job. Then a hand raised in the back, Officer Jenkins, not in uniform but clearly recognizable to most in attendance. Malik hesitated, then nodded, giving him the floor. Jenkins stood, visibly uncomfortable with all eyes on him. I'm Officer Ryan Jenkins. His voice was quieter than Malik had heard it before. I'm the officer who stopped Deputy Director Carter yesterday. The room grew tense, all attention fixed on the young officer. I've been thinking about what happened, about why I really stopped him. Jenkins paused, seeming to gather his courage. And the truth is, if he'd been white, I probably wouldn't have. I told myself it was his behavior, but it wasn't. It was bias. My bias. The admission sent a ripple through the crowd. Sheriff Dawson's face reddened, but he remained silent. I joined the force to help people, Jenkins continued. But yesterday made me realize I haven't been helping everyone equally. I don't know if anyone here can forgive that, but I wanted to acknowledge it publicly. As Jenkins sat down, the atmosphere in the church shifted. His candor had opened a door that couldn't be closed again. More testimonies followed. Stories of unequal treatment, of fear, of frustration with a system that seemed to serve some community members better than others. But there were also stories of officers who had gone above and beyond, who had treated everyone with respect regardless of race. When the last person had spoken, Malik addressed the crowd again. What I've heard today confirms what the data suggests. There are systemic issues within your police department that need to be addressed. But I've also heard that there are good officers here who want to serve this community well. He looked directly at Jenkins, then at the other officers present. Change is possible, but it requires honesty, accountability, and commitment from everyone involved, the department, the local government, and the community. My team will be here for as long as it takes to implement meaningful reforms. Mayor Harris stood, clearly feeling the need to reassert her authority. I want to assure everyone that the town council takes these concerns seriously. We will cooperate fully with the FBI's recommendations. Her words were political, crafted to acknowledge the problem without accepting responsibility. But politics aside, her public commitment was a victory. It gave the investigation leverage. As the meeting broke up, people clustered in small groups, the church buzzing with conversation. Malik found himself approached by Eleanor Jackson. Deputy Director, she said, extending her hand. Thank you for listening. It's been a long time since anyone in authority did. Ms. Jackson, I'd like your son to know that his experiences matter. They're part of a pattern we're here to address. She nodded. He'll talk to you. He's a good young man, just tired of being treated like a criminal. I understand, Malik replied. And he did. Not just professionally, but personally. As people filed out, Malik noticed Jenkins standing alone, avoided by both community members and his fellow officers. The young officer had taken a significant risk with his public admission. Whether it was a genuine moment of growth or a calculated attempt to save his career remained to be seen, but it was a starting point. Agent Richardson approached, tablet in hand. "Quite a meeting," she observed. "We've got 47 new testimonies to add to the file, and that officer's admission." "Could be significant," Malik finished for her, "but only if it leads to real change in his behavior." She nodded. "The teams compiled the department's training records. They haven't updated their bias training protocols in over a decade." "That changes immediately," Malik said firmly. "Draft a preliminary set of recommendations for immediate implementation while we continue the broader investigation." As they left the church, Malik caught sight of Sheriff Dawson in heated conversation with Mayor Harris. The power dynamics in Pinewood were shifting, and neither was comfortable with the new landscape. That discomfort was necessary. In Malik's experience, comfort was the enemy of progress. Systems didn't change when people were comfortable. They changed when staying the same became more painful than the process of transformation. The community meeting had accomplished what he'd hoped. It had made the invisible visible, had given voice to experiences that had been dismissed or ignored. Now came the harder part, translating those voices into concrete changes in policy and practice. As he walked back to the station with his team, Malik thought about Officer Jenkins' unexpected confession. It was a reminder that behind every badge was a person capable of reflection, of growth, of change. Whether the Pinewood Police Department as a whole was capable of such change remained to be seen, but for the first time since his arrival, Malik felt the balance tipping in favor of possibility. Chapter 5. 2 weeks into the investigation, the Pinewood Police Station had settled into a new rhythm. FBI agents had become a fixture, their presence no longer drawing stares from local officers. The initial resistance had given way to a wary cooperation, born partly of necessity and partly of the realization that the federal presence wasn't temporary. Malik sat in the conference room, now permanently converted into the investigation's command center, reviewing the latest set of data with his team. "Traffic stop disparities are the most pronounced," Agent Chen noted, pointing to a graph on the screen. "Black and Latino drivers are 3 times more likely to be stopped than white drivers and 5 times more likely to have their vehicles searched." Malik nodded, studying the numbers. "And the contraband hit rates?" "That's the telling part," Chen replied. "Despite the higher search rates for minorities, contraband was found in only 8% of those searches, compared to 23% for white drivers. So they're searching more minorities but finding less," Malik summarized. "Clear evidence of biased policing." Agent Williams added, "We've also compiled use-of-force incidents. The pattern is similar, disproportionately applied to non-white subjects, often in situations where reports indicate no resistance." The data painted a damning picture, one that went beyond individual bias to suggest systematic practices that targeted minorities. It wasn't unusual. Malik had seen similar patterns in departments across the country, but it was always disheartening. "What about the community feedback?" he asked. Richardson pulled up another file. "We've conducted 53 interviews with community members. The experiences break down along clear racial lines. White residents generally report positive interactions with police, while minorities report frequent negative encounters." "Any outliers?" Malik asked. "A few," Richardson acknowledged. "Some white residents who witnessed mistreatment of minorities, some minority residents who had positive experiences with specific officers." She highlighted a section of the report. "Officer Bennett is mentioned repeatedly as treating everyone fairly. And interestingly, Officer Jenkins has had no complaints in the past week." Malik raised an eyebrow. "Jenkins? The one who stopped me?" Richardson nodded. Since his public admission at the church, he seems to be making a conscious effort. Several community members have noted the change in his approach. It was a small but significant data point. Jenkins's transformation, if genuine, suggested that individual officers could change when confronted with their biases directly. A knock at the door interrupted their analysis. Sheriff Dawson stood in the doorway, his expression tense. "Deputy Director, may I speak with you privately?" Malik nodded to his team to continue their work and followed the sheriff to a small side office. "What can I do for you, Sheriff?" Dawson closed the door, then turned to face Malik. The man looked tired, the strain of the past 2 weeks evident in the new lines on his face. "I've been reviewing your team's preliminary findings," he began, "and I've been doing a lot of thinking." Malik waited, giving the sheriff space to continue. "I've been in law enforcement for almost 30 years, started as a beat cop right here in Pinewood." Dawson gestured vaguely toward the town beyond the station walls. "I've always believed I was serving this community well, that my department was doing right by the people here." "And now?" Malik prompted when Dawson fell silent. The sheriff sighed heavily. "Now I'm looking at data that says otherwise, looking at testimony from people I've known for decades who've been afraid to tell me how my officers treat them." He met Malik's eyes directly. "Including how they treated you." It was the first time the sheriff had directly acknowledged what had happened to Malik that first morning. "What happened to me was a symptom, Sheriff, not the disease," Malik said carefully. "The question is whether you're prepared to treat the underlying condition." Dawson nodded slowly. "That's why I wanted to speak with you. I'm retiring at the end of the month." The announcement caught Malik off guard. "Is this because of our investigation?" "Partly," Dawson admitted. "But mostly it's because I can't be the one to fix this. The department needs new leadership, someone who didn't help create these problems." He paused. "I've recommended Officer Bennett as my replacement. She's respected by the community, has a clean record, and most importantly, she sees the need for change." Malik considered this development. Sheriff Dawson stepping down voluntarily was unexpected, but potentially beneficial for the reform process. New leadership could implement changes without the baggage of defending past practices. "That's a significant decision, Sheriff." "It's the right one," Dawson replied. "I joined the force to protect and serve. If I'm not doing that for everyone in Pinewood, then it's time to step aside for someone who will." There was dignity in the sheriff's decision that Malik respected. It took courage to recognize one's own limitations and make way for progress. "What about the mayor and town council?" Malik asked. "Will they support Officer Bennett's appointment?" "Mayor Harris has concerns about appointing a woman, especially now with all this scrutiny," Dawson said, a hint of frustration in his tone. "But the council generally follows my recommendation, and public opinion is on Bennett's side, especially after your community meeting." Malik nodded thoughtfully. "I'd like to meet with Officer Bennett. If she's going to be leading reform efforts, we need to ensure our approaches align. She's on patrol now, but I'll have her report to you when she returns." Dawson hesitated, then added, "There's one more thing you should know. Jenkins has requested a transfer to the Community Outreach Division, says he wants to rebuild trust with the neighborhoods he's patrolled." "Approve it," Malik suggested. "Sometimes the officers who recognize their mistakes are the ones who can make the most meaningful changes." After Dawson left, Malik returned to the conference room, sharing the news with his team. "This changes our approach," he told them. "If Bennett takes over, we'll need to focus on providing her the support and resources to implement reforms, and we'll need to buffer her from potential resistance within the department." Agent Richardson looked skeptical. "You think the other officers will accept her leadership?" "Some will, some won't," Malik replied realistically. "Our job is to strengthen the hand of those committed to change and make it clear to the others that the old ways are no longer acceptable." The team spent the rest of the afternoon refining their recommendations, tailoring them to a department in transition. By evening, they had a comprehensive reform package ready to present. As Malik reviewed the final draft, Officer Bennett knocked on the conference room door. She was in her early 40s, with short, cropped hair and alert eyes that took in everything with calm assessment. "Deputy Director Carter, Sheriff Dawson said you wanted to see me." "Officer Bennett, please come in." Malik gestured to a chair. "I understand you may be Pinewood's next sheriff." Bennett took a seat, her posture straight but not rigid. "If the council approves, yes, it's not official yet." "But you're willing to take on the role?" She nodded, meeting his gaze directly. "I am. This department needs change. I've known it for years, but it took your investigation to bring it into the open." "Tell me why you think you're the right person to lead that change," Malik said, watching her carefully. Bennett considered the question before answering. "Because I've seen the problem from both sides. I've worked within this system long enough to understand how it operates, but I've also seen how it fails certain members of our community." She leaned forward slightly. "And because I'm stubborn enough not to give up when it gets difficult, and it will get difficult." Her candor was refreshing. "How would you handle resistance from within the ranks?" "Directly," she replied without hesitation. "Some officers will adapt to new policies. Those who can't or won't will need to find positions elsewhere. I won't tolerate biased policing under my leadership." Malik nodded, impressed by her clarity. "And Officer Jenkins?" "I hear he's requested a transfer to community outreach." "Jenkins has surprised me," Bennett admitted. "His admission at the church meeting took courage. Whether it leads to lasting change in his behavior remains to be seen, but I'm inclined to give him the opportunity to prove himself." They discussed the reform package Malik's team had prepared: new training protocols, accountability measures, community oversight, revised use of force policies. Bennett engaged thoughtfully with each proposal, asking pertinent questions and offering insights based on her knowledge of the department. By the end of their conversation, Malik felt cautiously optimistic. Bennett wasn't naive about the challenges ahead, but she possessed both the will and the capability to lead meaningful change. "One last question," Malik said as their meeting concluded. "Why did you become a police officer?" Bennett smiled slightly. "To protect people who need protecting. All people, not just some." She stood to leave. "That hasn't changed, even if my understanding of what it means has evolved over the years." After she left, Malik made a note to include his strong recommendation for Bennett's appointment in his next report to Washington. Leadership was crucial to sustainable reform, and Bennett seemed to offer the right combination of insider knowledge and reformist vision. The investigation was entering a new phase, moving from diagnosis to treatment. The problems within the Pinewood Police Department had been identified, documented, and acknowledged. Now came the harder work of creating and implementing solutions that would outlast the FBI's presence. As Malik prepared to leave for the evening, he received a text from Eleanor Jackson. "My son Marcus would like to meet with you tomorrow if possible. He's ready to share his experiences." Malik replied immediately, arranging to meet Marcus the following afternoon. The testimonies of community members like Marcus were essential, not just for documenting past abuses, but for measuring future progress. Outside the station, the evening air carried the scent of approaching rain. Pinewood looked peaceful in the fading light, its small-town charm undiminished by the upheaval of recent weeks. But beneath that tranquil surface, significant changes were taking shape. Changes that would, Malik hoped, make that peace accessible to all of Pinewood's residents, regardless of the color of their skin.